Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Oakwood was a quiet town, where everyone knew each other, and where secrets seemed impossible to keep. Yet, behind the perfectly maintained facades and manicured lawns, hid a truth that very few knew. David Carter, a man respected throughout the town, was not just a loving and discreet father, he was the head of the FBI, responsible for crucial, often dangerous missions, and above all, accustomed to controlling the uncontrollable. His daughter, Jasmine Carter, was everything her town could admire: intelligent, gentle, courageous, and curious. At 17, she excelled in school, played the piano with passion, and dreamed of becoming a lawyer to defend those who were victims of injustice. She had inherited her father's calm authority, but also a rebellious spirit that rejected injustice in all its forms. One summer morning, the sun bathed the streets in golden light, but an invisible wind of hatred and prejudice was about to shatter Jasmine's day. Martha Whitman, an elderly and notoriously racist neighbor, spotted Jasmine walking toward the bus stop. In her twisted mind, every step Jasmine took seemed like a threat. The prejudices she had nurtured for years took hold. Furious, Martha rushed inside, slammed the door behind her, and dialed the police with trembling hands. Her voice was poisoned by fear and racism. "Hello, I want to report a young black girl who's been loitering in the neighborhood. She seems suspicious to me, you need to come right away." At that moment, Jasmine continued on her way, unaware of the imminent danger. She was lost in thought, dreaming about her upcoming audition for her high school's debate club. She had no idea that her life was about to change forever because of the arrogance of a neighbor. In his secure office at the FBI, David Carter received a discreet but alarming call. The voice on the phone mentioned an incident involving his daughter. A chill ran down his spine. Any father would have panicked, but David knew that every mistake could be exploited. Quickly, he grabbed his jacket and left his office, preparing to protect his daughter, but also to confront the pride and racism that had been unleashed against her. That morning, Oakwood would never be the same. Martha's arrogance would clash with David Carter's power and authority, and Jasmine would find herself at the heart of a confrontation that would change her life, but above all, reveal that injustice and hatred never go unnoticed. Martha Whitman's phone always sat on her kitchen table, ready to unleash her anger at any moment. That morning, she had watched Jasmine Carter slowly cross the sidewalk, her backpack slung over her shoulder, a faint smile on her face. To Martha, that smile was nothing but a silent provocation, an invisible threat that had to be stopped immediately. Her fingers trembled as she dialed 911. Yes, hello. I want to report a young, black girl. She's been walking around the neighborhood. I think she could cause some trouble. Yes, come right away. After hanging up, she slumped back in her chair, satisfied with what she believed to be a heroic act. Little did she know that this call would trigger a chain of events she could never have imagined. Meanwhile, Jasmine walked peacefully toward the school, enjoying the cool morning air. She whistled softly, completely unaware that her neighbor had just reported her for no reason. She was thinking about her classes, her debate project, and the essay she had to hand in that afternoon. Nothing in her day had prepared her for what was about to happen. A few minutes later, police officers Tom Reynolds and Lisa Green arrived in the neighborhood. The siren remained low, but their presence already created a palpable tension. They stopped near Jasmine, who also stopped, a little surprised. "Good morning, miss," said Tom, in an authoritative but polite voice. "Hello," replied Jasmine, uncertainly. Lisa, with her arms crossed, looked at her suspiciously. "We have been informed that you are a suspect. You must show us some form of identification." Jasmine felt a lump form in her throat. Her heart was beating faster, not from fear of authority, but from the injustice she felt she was facing simply because of the color of her skin. She calmly took her identity card out of her bag. "I haven't done anything wrong," she said in a firm but respectful voice. "We need to check," replied Lisa, without breaking her cold gaze. Martha, from her window, watched the scene with a triumphant smile. She saw only a victim whom she thought she was protecting her community from. But she was completely unaware of Jasmine's identity. This moment, seemingly ordinary, marked the beginning of a confrontation that would highlight not only the prejudices of some, but also the strength and dignity of an innocent young girl, as well as the power of a father ready to do anything to defend his family. A few minutes after Martha's call, the patrol car screeched to a halt in front of Jasmine. The tires squealed softly on the asphalt, drawing the attention of the early morning passers-by. Inside, Tom Reynolds and Lisa Green exchanged a glance, slightly nervous but determined to assert their authority. "There's the girl," murmured Tom, as they got out of the car. Jasmine watched them approach, trying to remain calm. She'd had a few interactions with the police before, but she'd never felt judged for something she hadn't done. A wave of injustice washed over her. "Hello," she said politely. "Hello, miss," Lisa replied with a forced smile. "We received a report, you are a suspect." Jasmine frowned, shocked. "Suspicious? Why? I didn't do anything." Martha, still watching from her window, clenched her fists. She savored her victory, convinced she had made the right choice. But she was completely unaware that she had just put Jasmine in danger, and that she would soon regret her arrogance. Tom took out his notebook and said in an authoritative tone, "We need to check your papers." Jasmine calmly pulled out her school ID, but Tom and Lisa continued to eye her suspiciously, as if her mere presence justified their intervention. The usually peaceful neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. "I'm walking to school," Jasmine explained. "I haven't done anything wrong." "We need to make sure everything is in order," replied Lisa, lightly gripping the notebook. The tension rose a notch when Tom took a slightly intrusive step towards her. Jasmine instinctively recoiled, fear mixed with anger. At that moment, a shiver ran down her spine, something important was about to happen. At that very moment, David Carter's phone rang at the FBI. A report indicated an incident involving his daughter. David felt his heart sink. He quickly realized the situation required his immediate intervention. That morning, the calm of Oakwood was shattered. A confrontation was about to erupt, and no one, not even Martha, could foresee how much this situation would change everyone's lives. Jasmine felt her heart pounding. Tom and Lisa seemed to hesitate, but their duty, or at least what they thought was their duty, compelled them to continue. "Step back a little, miss," said Tom, his voice slightly firmer. "We need to check your belongings." Jasmine shook her head, refusing to give in to what she knew to be an injustice. "I have nothing to hide. You have no reason to treat me like this." Lisa frowned and took a step forward. "You must cooperate," she said, attempting to impose her authority. Martha, from her window, was silently jubilant. For her, the mere fact that the police were there proved she had been right. But she didn't know that the situation would quickly spiral out of control. Tom, slightly frustrated by Jasmine's resistance, placed a hand on her arm to guide her toward the patrol car. This gesture triggered an immediate reaction. Jasmine stepped back sharply and said, in a trembling but firm voice, "Don't touch me." At that precise moment, David Carter's phone vibrated. His assistant at the FBI informed him that an incident involving his daughter had just been reported in the neighborhood. His face hardened. He knew exactly what was happening. His daughter was being treated unfairly, and the police had no idea who she really was. A few minutes later, David arrived in his black car, his imposing presence immediately turning heads. Tom and Lisa were stunned to see the man getting out, a calm but authoritative figure, a penetrating gaze, and an aura that commanded respect instantly. "I am David Carter," he said in a firm but icy voice. "And you touch my daughter for no reason?" Tom and Lisa looked at each other, fear and surprise mingling with guilt. They had learned to respect David Carter's reputation, but they had never imagined being confronted with him in such a personal situation. Martha, meanwhile, paled as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. The young woman she had arrogantly denounced was not only innocent, she was the daughter of the FBI director. Her triumphant smile vanished instantly, replaced by silent panic. David stepped towards Jasmine, gently took her by the shoulder and reassured her. Everything's fine, Jasmine. You haven't done anything wrong. The winds of injustice had finally been swept away by an authority far greater than Martha's or the police officers. But the lesson wasn't just for Martha. Tom and Lisa would have to confront their own prejudices and understand the mistake they had almost made. David Carter's presence immediately changed the atmosphere. The air seemed heavier, every second weighed heavily, and the police officers understood that they were facing something far more serious than a simple suspicious call. Tom and Lisa exchanged a worried glance. Never in their careers had they seen anyone impose such silence and authority without raising their voice. David, calm but determined, stepped towards them. You were called about my daughter, he began, his voice icy and controlled. But you have no reason to arrest her. None. Lisa stammered, trying to justify herself. We were simply following protocol, Mr. Carter. David stared at her, his gaze enough to make anyone tremble. Protocol does not justify racism, arrogance, or the humiliation of an innocent person. You almost made a serious mistake. Jasmine, standing behind her father, felt a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time since this situation had begun, she felt protected. Martha, for her part, was frozen in place. The woman she had tried to have arrested was no ordinary person, she was the daughter of the FBI director. Panic rose within her. Her trembling voice attempted to downplay her actions. I didn't know. I thought. David cut her off in an icy tone. You've made a monumental mistake, Martha. You've harmed my family and created a dangerous situation for my daughter. There will be consequences. The police officers lowered their eyes in shame. Even though they had never intentionally meant to cause harm, their behavior had been influenced by prejudice. And now, facing the authority of the FBI director, they understood the gravity of their actions. David turned to Jasmine and gently took her hand. Everything is fine now. But it's important that you understand that sometimes people are ignorant and arrogant. You should never let that define you. Jasmine nodded, moved by her father's protective presence. She knew that, despite the fear and injustice she had just suffered, she had before her a model of strength and integrity. At that moment, Oakwood no longer resembled the quiet town it seemed to be. The confrontation had just revealed the truth about the hatred that sometimes hides behind facades, but also about the power of justice when guided by courage and authority. Martha Whitman remained frozen in her doorway, unable to breathe properly. Every word from David Carter had the effect of a thunderclap. Reality had just hit her. She had thought she was acting in the right way, but she had just humiliated and endangered the daughter of the FBI director. David approached calmly, each step measured, each glance icy. Martha, he said slowly, what you did is unacceptable. You abused your position as a neighborhood watch and spread gratuitous hatred. Martha balbutia. I didn't want to. I was just thinking. You only thought that? David repeated, his voice grave. You called the police to harass an innocent young girl. You thought she posed a threat to your little idea of a perfect neighborhood. You failed, and you're going to have to answer for it. The police officers, still present, lowered their eyes. Tom murmured. Mr. Carter, we followed protocol. David raised his hand, interrupting Tom. Protocol never excuses racism. You must acknowledge your mistakes. And believe me, they will not be ignored. Jasmine, clinging to her father, watched Martha. The pride and strength she felt stemmed from the very dignity her father embodied. For the first time, Martha realized she wasn't in a position of superiority. All her arrogance had just crumbled in the face of authority, justice, and truth. I understand, Martha murmured, her voice breaking with shame. Understanding isn't enough, David replied. You're going to have to explain your actions and learn why what you did was completely unacceptable. At that moment, a feeling of relief and power washed over Jasmine. It wasn't just her father's protection that gave her courage, but the certainty that justice, however discreet, existed and could repair some of the harm caused by ignorance and hatred. David Carter then addressed the police officers. You will be undergoing mandatory training on racism and racial profiling. It's time to learn what your role truly entails. Tom and Lisa nodded silently. They finally understood that this confrontation would teach them more than any previous lesson. Martha, still trembling, went back inside her house. She had just been exposed and humiliated, but the real lesson had only just begun. After the incident, Oakwood no longer seemed so peaceful. Neighbors whispered in the streets, and Martha Whitman, once so self-assured, remained cloistered in her home, ashamed and humiliated. News of what had happened spread quickly. The girl she had thought she could harass was the daughter of the FBI director. David Carter took Jasmine by the hand and led her a few streets away, out of sight of onlookers. His voice was calm, but firm. Jasmine, what happened today was unfair and cruel. But it's important that you see that the hatred and arrogance of others will never define your worth. Jasmine nodded, moved. She had felt the fear and the injustice, but her father's support, his protection and his calm gave her new strength. Thank you, Dad. I felt so alone facing them. You've never been alone, David replied. And now the whole neighborhood will know that this kind of behavior will never go unpunished. The police officers, Tom and Lisa, were summoned to the station for a procedural review. Their conduct would be subject to a serious evaluation, and they would have to undergo mandatory training on discrimination and racial profiling. It was a lesson they would never forget. In the neighborhood, a few courageous neighbors began approaching Jasmine and her father, expressing their support and solidarity. Jasmine felt a mixture of relief and pride. For the first time, she understood that injustice could be fought, and that truth and courage always prevailed. Martha, for her part, remained silent behind her curtains, reflecting on her actions and the destructive power of her prejudices. She had just realized that gratuitous hatred had real consequences, especially when it affected someone like Jasmine. David turned to his daughter and said, "What happened today is a lesson for them, but also for you. Stay strong, stay fair, and never let anyone bring you down." Jasmine smiled faintly, feeling a new strength growing within her. This morning, which had begun with fear and humiliation, was ending with a feeling of justice and protection, and she knew that she had learned something that few girls her age would have experienced, the true meaning of dignity, courage, and justice. In the days that followed, the incident became the talk of the town in Oakwood. Neighbors who had turned a blind eye to Martha's prejudices began to question themselves. Even those who thought it didn't concern them realized that one person's hatred and arrogance could destabilize an entire community. Martha Whitman, humiliated and compelled by the conscience of her actions, had to face the consequences. Local authorities, informed by the FBI, required her to attend a formal hearing to explain her behavior. The police officers who had followed her lead were also reprimanded. In the neighborhood meeting room, Martha stood before a few neighbors and city representatives. Her face was red with shame and her hands were trembling. I didn't know. I only thought," she murmured, unable to formulate a valid justification. A neighbor spoke up, his voice firm. "Thinking alone isn't enough, Martha. We must all live together and respect every person, without prejudice." Martha, publicly confronted, understood how destructive her actions had been. Her arrogance and gratuitous hatred had not only endangered an innocent young girl, but had also shaken the trust of the entire neighborhood. Jasmine, accompanied by her father, watched the scene from a distance. She felt a mixture of compassion and pride. This moment wasn't just a lesson for Martha, it was a lesson for all the residents. Racism and discrimination had no place in their community. David Carter then addressed the crowd. Today's incident should remind us that every action has a consequence. Fear, hatred, and arrogance are never justified. And justice always exists, even when some think they can act with impunity. Silence fell, heavy but filled with understanding. The neighbors, moved by David's words, began to reflect on their own prejudices and how they could contribute to a more just and respectful community. Martha, for her part, returned home, her heart heavy with shame and regret. She had been exposed, not only by David Carter, but by the entire town. It was a pivotal moment. Her way of thinking had to change, or she would continue to live in isolation and distrust of others. For Jasmine, it was a silent victory. Truth and justice had triumphed, and she understood that even in the most unjust moments, courage and dignity could make all the difference. A few weeks after the incident, Oakwood was slowly beginning to return to calm. Conversations in the neighborhood were now different. Instead of whispering about tragedies or prejudices, residents discussed justice, respect, and tolerance. Jasmine, still scarred by the experience, had grown inwardly. She understood that the hatred of others should never prevent her from living her life to the fullest. With her father's support, she decided to confront Martha, not with anger, but with dignity. David accompanied his daughter to Martha's house, ensuring the meeting took place safely. Martha opened the door, trembling, aware that this moment would confront her with the reality of her actions. "Hello, Martha," Jasmine began calmly. "I wanted to talk to you." I don't know what to say," stammered Martha. Jasmine took a deep breath and continued. "What you did hurt and humiliated me. But I want you to understand that hate never has the last word. We all have the choice to change and do better." Martha lowered her head, overwhelmed by shame and emotion. Jasmine's words, simple yet powerful, reached her deeply. I'm sorry, Jasmine. I understand now," she murmured. David, silent but present, observed the scene. He knew that Jasmine's strength came not only from her family, but also from her ability to transform a painful experience into a life lesson. "Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting," Jasmine explained. "But it does mean we can move forward, learn, and not let hatred control our lives." Martha nodded, finally understanding the magnitude of her mistakes. For the first time, she felt genuine remorse and a sincere desire to change. At that precise moment, Jasmine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The confrontation with Martha served not only to redress the wrong done, but also to show the entire community that an act of courage and dignity could transform even the most hardened heart. This encounter marked a turning point for Oakwood. The neighbors began to reflect on their own prejudices and the impact of their words and actions. And for Jasmine, it was confirmation that, despite injustice and hatred, truth, courage, and compassion could always triumph. The incident with Jasmine Carter was not an isolated incident in Oakwood. Its repercussions were felt throughout the town, in the streets, the schools, and even at the police station. The way David Carter had handled the situation had shown everyone that gratuitous hatred and prejudice had real consequences. At the police station, Tom Reynolds and Lisa Green underwent mandatory training on racism and racial profiling. This was not a mere formality. They had to examine their mistakes, understand the dynamics of systemic racism, and reflect on how their behavior could affect innocent lives. Tom, once so self-assured, confided in Lisa. "I never realized how biased my judgments could be. I just thought I was doing my job. But today, it's different." Lisa nodded, her voice trembling. "Yes. I see now how our prejudices can destroy someone's life." Jasmine hadn't done anything wrong. Meanwhile, in the neighborhood, residents began to change their behavior. Conversations once rife with rumors and suspicion transformed into discussions about respect, tolerance, and empathy. Parents told their children Jasmine's story not as a frightening anecdote, but as a lesson in courage and dignity. Martha Whitman, now isolated, slowly began to reflect on her actions. Shame followed her everywhere, but she was also aware that what she had done had awakened a collective conscience. She knew she had to change in order not to remain a prisoner of her prejudices. Jasmine, for her part, continued her life with greater confidence and pride. She understood that the experience had strengthened her resilience and her determination to defend those who were victims of injustice. She was now a quiet but powerful symbol of what courage and truth could accomplish in the face of hatred. David Carter, watching his daughter, felt a mixture of pride and relief. Justice hadn't just protected Jasmine that day, it had sown a lasting lesson in the neighborhood and in the hearts of the officers involved. Oakwood had changed, and Jasmine's example would continue to inspire those who sought to do what was right. In the weeks following the incident, Oakwood underwent a slow but profound transformation. Whispers of hatred and prejudice gave way to conversations about respect, justice, and vigilance against arrogance. Jasmine Carter's story became a silent but powerful symbol. Even in the face of hatred, courage, dignity, and truth ultimately prevail. Humiliated and confronted with her own prejudices, Martha Whitman began a process of sincere reflection. She understood that arrogance and gratuitous hatred had destroyed not only her credibility but also the peace of an entire neighborhood. This was not a mere warning, it was a lesson she would never forget. Police officers Tom Reynolds and Lisa Green, after completing their mandatory training, changed the way they interacted with the community. They became more attentive, aware of their own biases, and determined to protect and serve every citizen impartially. The Jasmine incident had taught them that every action, even one guided by protocol, had profound human consequences. For Jasmine, it was a moment of immense personal growth. She had endured fear, humiliation, and injustice, but she emerged stronger and more determined. Her father, David Carter, the head of the FBI, remained by her side, not only as a protector but as a guide and role model of justice and courage. One morning, Jasmine walked through her neighborhood, free and proud. The neighbors now greeted her with respect and gratitude, and she understood that the real victory was not only having been protected, but having transformed a painful experience into a lesson for everyone. David Carter, watching his daughter walk confidently, murmured, "You have shown what no hatred can destroy, the strength of dignity and the power of truth." Jasmine smiled, aware that, despite the hardships, she had gained something far more precious than mere security. She had gained respect, trust, and the conviction that, in the face of injustice, courage and truth can always triumph. And so Oakwood continued his life, transformed, but this time with a lesson engraved in everyone's heart: prejudices have consequences, and justice, however discreet, always ends up emerging.